But I will tell you that this is not a typical, the craft he was referring to are ours. That was Raytheon objects. Those are, and he said, yes, they are. His key point needs to be made, absolutely. They have been used in simulated quote-unquote abductions. In this case, a very decorated and heroic man was essentially tortured by this. This is a crime that must be investigated and brought to justice quickly. The next witness is D.C. Long from Fort Bragg. He was involved in an incidental event. Many of these witnesses at this point were people who saw something they shouldn't, and there were reprisals and things that happened. It's a pattern. The ones that were read in for a number of years, like one man that I shared earlier, 10 years in those operations, those are the ones waiting for greater protection for themselves before they step forward, but we have many of them. So with no further ado, I welcome my friend, D.C. Long.
I promise mine's going to be much quicker than some of these other guys, and this is the way I talk. So I apologize for that as well. Everyone that I've met here, I would love to go through every name. I would love to go through every situation. What these gentlemen have, we could spend years talking about it, just getting to all the moments and everything that meant the most to us. And unfortunately, I have a very short amount of time to do that. My military service began in 1997, and it stretched to 2013 until I was medically retired, injuries received in a combat jump. Ironically enough, the quick story that I'm going to tell you guys has virtually nothing to do with my military career until it got to the very end of the story. Long story short, my father grew up as a contractor. That was his entire life. He could build anything with his hands. He could tear it down and build it again for you. I segue that, and the only reason I bring him up is because my father is how I got tied into this story. As a government contractor on Fort Bragg, he met some people, he got friends with some people in the upper echelons in the military, the tip of the spear. The guys who didn't need the Army Corps of Engineers permission to build anything that they wanted. These people that I met when I was 13 years old. We would go on hunts together. We would go on fishing trips together, riding their planes. They would take us all over the continental U.S. just to enjoy their time together, people that I thought were my friends. But I didn't know that they were in the military until years after I had been in myself. We meet up at 18th Airborne Headquarters by my father's request from me. He asked me if I could help him assist. We didn't know where the project was. We were told that we were going to be met by an escort from the JFK Warfare Center. He shows up. I recognize him as one of my father's friends. I overheard that the place we're going to be going is Range 19. I'd never heard of this place before, hadn't since. They put us in a van, no windows, no partition to the front. So we were joking, what did you say? Because we're taking you to Leavenworth. We show up at Range 19. The only thing that was directly in front of me looked like a bunker, 45 degree inches from a concrete bunker, covered in trash. Looked like an actual dump. We open up, there's another escort, and they're waiting on us. They take us to a freight elevator. We take the elevator down. At that time, we were instructed, keep your heads down, keep your eyes on the heels of the men in front of you, or you'll be fired upon. I've heard plenty of instances of military jargon. People like to jive each other. I didn't take it as a joke, but I knew enough to just do what he told me to. I didn't want to risk it. As soon as the freight elevator opened, the first thing that I could see were a few personnel connexes to the right in a large hangar, maybe twice, 3 times the size of the area that we're in now. There was a monolithic slab directly in front of me that was being held up by nothing. The closer that I got to this slab, I felt an intense vibration inside of my body. I never felt anything like that before in my life, never anything since, but it left no sound. The loudest thing in that room was the silence and the footfalls of the people in front of and behind me. As I got closer, my natural southern curiosity took over. Oh, my shoes are untied. So I go down just to take a peek. And there's absolutely nothing up underneath this monolithic slab that, if I had to estimate, would be well over 100 tons. Absolutely nothing holding it up. You can see by the picture, there's another boulder directly behind it. It was flat on the ground. There were two other people beside it. I could only see heels and feet. To the right, you could see what looked like a boulder. And all three of these that I could tell had this box on top that was black with spires that came off, and I couldn't tell where it was connected, but it obviously had something to do with the levitation. The one to the right was being spun by the personnel that you could see in the picture. At this point, from my knees, the escort kneed me in the back, said, "Let's go." We follow on, go downstairs to our appointed place to take measurements for an underground firing facility for a live fire range. Excuse me. When it was all said and done, less than 15, 20 minutes later, we make our way back to the surface through the same hangar that we had noticed the monolithic slabs and the boulders. And there was absolutely nothing there. There was no noise for anyone taking anything out. It was one flight down to our appointed place, but you could still hear that there was nothing going on in the facility that we were in. We make our way out. We get back in the van, and they take us back to 18th Airborne Headquarters so we can retrieve our telephones, our IDs. Something was said to my father, and they retrieved all of the notes that were taken. Everything that he had that he recorded from whenever we were downstairs, they took it from him. I didn't think much of it. I go back upstairs, help him wrap up in the G5 war room. And it was at that time there was a gentleman sitting at the desk. Everyone was cleared out. And he had two pieces of paper. Said, I need you to sign this NDA. Absolutely not. You know, we didn't so much take it as a joke, but we just didn't feel like the things that we had witnessed, although I did realize it was something that I never should have seen in my life. We weren't going to sign it. Didn't think anything of it. I leave. I get a call the next day, less than 24 hours later. Hey, man, you need to come down. We're trying to go to work, and everything's locked up. Everything's gone. Everything that my father had worked for, from the time that I was a child until I became a man, became a soldier, and the company that had my name on it, everything was seized. Absolutely everything was seized. The pencils that he would use to make bid submittals to the Army Corps of Engineers was even taken because it contributed from the business. Everything was taken. I can't illustrate that point enough. My father went from being a very humble millionaire to absolutely broke, bankrupt, and destitute in 24 hours. Now, I wish I could tell you more about how much I love this man, not just because I have his name, not just because he's my father, but he was my best friend. He led me through every battle when I came home to let me know that it was okay to feel the things that I felt. This man and I, we were always together. The only thing that could separate us was the deployments and the uniform that I wore. When I got done with my fight, I found my father. When I was scared, I found my father, etc. This man that was my best friend looked me in the eye when I found him again and said, hey man, do you think this had something to do with Range 19? Please pardon my language. My father looks at me and says, don't you ever fucking bring that up to me again. That was the last time that I heard my father's voice in this life. That was the last time that we ever had any peaceful interaction, and that was as peaceful as it got. Shortly after, I continue on, and we had a JFEX. Any of my old paratroopers, they know what that is. It's a jump field training exercise, battalion-wide. It's a big deal. There's only 12 men in my stick, getting ready to go out at the bird. I'm the first man looking at the horizon, waiting for the jump master to give me the signal. His hand's raised. I notice at the right side, someone coming up to my shoulder, and it's one of the escorts, one of the men that I knew personally from the time I was a child till I was a man and a soldier. He hooks up, he looks at me, gives me a wink. I didn't think much of it. To me, there was no danger at that point. Green light goes off, I get a hit in my back, and then something hits me in the side of the face, and it's a static line. The gentleman to my right, the man that I knew, threw his static line intentionally, and it snapped my neck. I go to fall out of the aircraft, deploy my combat pack, full oscillation. The only thing that I heard after that was the sound that my body made when it broke. When I woke up a month later, I was told that I was not fit to be a Ranger. I was not fit to be airborne. I wasn't fit to be a soldier. My career was effectively over. Even throughout all this time, I could not reach out to my father. He wouldn't take my calls. He was homeless. I didn't know. I just thought he didn't want to talk to me. Eventually, I ended up in the same situation. This follows further down the road to about 2 years ago, whenever I finally was saved by someone who I didn't even deserve to hear the sound of the voice. I had intentionally grown my hair past my shoulders, my beard down to my stomach. I was 135 pounds just because I was hoping I could hide. I was hoping I could get away from what put me in that position to begin with. I get a phone call. It was 2 years ago. We found Daddy. He's in the hospital. I go down to see my father. He couldn't speak. The man that was 6'4", 240 pounds, a superhero in my eyes, not just because he was my daddy, because he was a tough son of a bitch. He was laying in a hospital bed, 98 pounds. When the people who I encountered after the fact that had actually spent time, excuse me, and got my father out of his homeless situation to help him get back on his feet, to give him the drive, to get back to doing the only thing that he knew how to do was to be a government contractor, they put him back in contact with some of the people that he thought could help him. I can't illustrate this fact enough. In the time span of 3 months, my father went from 6'4", 240 to 98 pounds, dying in a hospital room, and he couldn't even speak because the chemo was burning his lips. I told him, I love you. Don't worry about us. We're square. I want to make you proud. Before Dr. Greer and I came in contact with each other, and I'm almost done, I wrote my story, and I entitled it, I'm Afraid to Say. And people have asked me, well, why did you wait so long? I mean, it's obvious why we waited so long to send it. Nobody knows this. My family doesn't know this. Dr. Greer obviously doesn't know this. When I sent that, I was planning on taking my life because they took every damn thing from me. I could handle losing my career. I was willing to die for my country. I was hoping like hell I would. Somehow I survived. And then they tried to take me again. They can have all of that. I knew that when I put these around my neck. But my intention was to take my own life because I just couldn't do it anymore. I heard this man's words with Sean Ryan, if good men do nothing, then evil men will prevail. I am damn tired of doing nothing. This is the absolute last thing that I'm going to say to you. I was trained to never fight. I was trained to fight, never give up, never stop, as long as you had a breath in your body. I gave my breath away. The people in this room, everyone that I've had the blessed opportunity to spend time with, I've heard you say that we're brave, that we're heroes, and it embarrasses me because I personally felt like I don't deserve to be in the room with all of you heroes, because I would not have the words and the breath to come from my body if it wasn't for the strength that you give me when you shake my hand, when you hug my neck. Thank you so much. Godspeed.
I'd like to introduce, and thank you very much. Again, men are courageous, and it's very emotional. And it should be. I'd like to introduce Eric Hecker. He's a Raytheon contractor based for about a year at the South Pole. He was involved in a neutrino light array. He has an enormous amount of information, but in the interest of time, we'll be brief. Thank you, Mr. Hecker.